move into then the 2013 plan, and I'm going to do this in reverse order, so Scott, I'm going to first.
And thank you so much.
Anytime.
Can I make a request that when we refer to something specifically, that we also refer to the page number?
Great idea. Okay, so I'm suggesting we insert page 18 into the document.
And I've asked the departments as we go through these, as you get through, if there's something that's flying under the radar to mention that. So this is an opportunity that's not on here. If you see something that the council should know about, it's a good time to bring that.
Okay, I start off with the Department of Effectiveness. With what occurred with the annexation, we then became, set in what our department was going to be. That was in flux for a significant period of time. So we were looking at how we were going to handle things in the future with the department. Now that we know what our department looks like, it became very important to me to look at every aspect of the department, every position that I had, and determine the effectiveness of that position. My priority has been control, it always has been, but I do have other ancillary units that help contribute to the well-being of the community and also helps reduce these calls for patrol. So that's still ongoing. We are looking at every position, my gang unit, my street crimes unit, my set unit, the detective unit, and seeing where we can be the most effective in those. And trying to prioritize what our work should be. So, again, very ongoing. To get to Councilmember Flock's concern about the Metro parking lot, we've actually seen quite a reduction in crime at the Metro parking lot since its redesigned. That has helped us tremendously. We don't have the same kind of hidden areas where crime used to occur at the parking lot, and so that higher visibility along with Metro also has cameras that are both in the parking garage and in the transit center has helped quite a bit. But we did work with the Metro Transit Police in getting what we have deemed a liaison, and this is a person that's actually assigned to our precinct. He works out of the precinct to work with the patrol sergeants and patrol officers to address any of the concerns that happen. There are also laws and ordinances that only Metro Police can, including trespassing, that they can do. So that helps us in teaching the officers what to look for, how to deal with some of the issues that are there, which are somewhat minor, but Metro on their properties do have some authorities that allow us to deal with those. So that just started first of the year, probably just a little bit before, and it again is a work in progress dealing with that area and this new liaison position, which I think is very, very beneficial. We are looking at a new shift schedule. There has been one that was developed in the city of Shoreline that we have been analyzing as far as there are periods of time, it doesn't go along a straight schedule, so there are periods of time when we in fact double up the amount of officers on the street, and we can look at high impact times, high calls for service times for those. It also at certain times allows us to have almost everybody working, so we can provide training and do things that essentially in the past have cost us overtime. That is again ongoing. One of the issues that we have is that we have a guild and we have labor issues, and we're trying to work through those. We're trying to work through the guild on those. We have received tentative permission for our cities to do this program. Unfortunately, because of the way our supervision is structured, we can't do it without having also the unincorporated area do it. And that's what our sticking point is right now. The sheriff has announced that he is going back. You may not even have known that we changed our organizational structure to what they call zones. And we had 4 zones, where in the past we had 3 precincts. And we had, it was very complicated. So he's come back and said we are going back to a precinct model. So we are going back to what we were. It didn't affect us an awful lot because most of our area, the southwest precinct, was what it used to be, was Burien, SeaTac, North Highline, Skyway, and Vashon, and that, it never changed. So we are gonna go back to that. So we are looking at this new alternative schedule. I'm very excited about it because I think if we do this, I get more officers on the street. I think if we look at, in the future, I don't know that I would need more positions in order to do a more effective job with what we have in Burien. I will never stop advocating for more positions, but I try to be a team player. You know, I don't take all the money.
The guy who's got half of our budget.
Yeah, I know. So that's what we're working on this year, and I'm hoping that we can get some kind of resolution with the guild on this by the end of the year. I don't know, they're in labor negotiations and it can go to arbitration, and we may not have it for a while. But certainly excited about the transit police liaison, and I think it's just a good time for us to look at all we do and how we can do it more effectively.
So is Facebook coming up? Is that still on your radar?
Facebook, yeah, Facebook is actually created. It's just a matter of my computer person is Captain Cole and knows everything about computer. I'm not that person, but he has been taken away with other computer issues and other staffing issues that we've had to deal with. And it really is finding that person that is going to be able to monitor it, respond if there is a need for response. We have some cities within the contract cities that are doing Facebook right now, and it's very popular. So it will come back. It is still there.
Okay, so it's still on your work plan for 2013. And then there was I think there was another comment about publicizing an email address.
Our website, the Cop Logic,
And adding an email address as well, right? And the what? Adding
Yeah,
an email
adding
address?
a separate email address, yes.
Okay, so
Oh,
in addition to the
okay.
Cop Logic, yeah. And then there was comment about community outreach, which you said was ongoing.
Our community, yeah. Again, last year we did a number of community meetings as a city, and then I'm involved in New Futures, Carousels. There is continuing outreach, especially within our diverse community. It's very important for us to kind of have a finger on the pulse of that. And I think when we look at more calls for service that we're seeing, what we are hoping is that we are building that trust that, because that's a barrier for us and always has been. So the diverse community contacting us and talking to us. So we're hoping that that's dealing with a lot of that. Our school resource officer is tremendous, absolutely tremendous. And he is working on some very exciting things in the school, and that's another way that breaks down the barriers because a lot of our kids are from diverse communities. So that will always be ongoing. And most of everything we do is ongoing.
And my comment is just to utilize TV 21 either through announcements or short videos that could run throughout the day. There's a lot of blank space on TV 21, and I think the work you do would really improve that outreach.
I think Henry's on one right now.
Okay.
Yeah. He's our spokesmodel.
Yes, he is.
Other comments? Jack?
Yeah, thank you for your work on the parents, and I just want to follow up. I appreciate that you've worked hard to try to address these, but there's still a matter of perception. And one thing from I hear from a number of people is that they want to use transit, but they're uncomfortable because they're public safety concerns. So, within reducing that problem there, if there's a way to get the word out that it's being addressed, I think it will go a long way towards making people feel more comfortable and also possibly improve transit.
Okay. I can certainly have either the officer that's doing this or myself give a report to council about what the program is and how we're dealing with it, so it does get out.
Well, whatever you think is appropriate, I think, it's going to take report at council, and then get the word out through the press. And I think that's important too, so.
Other comments, questions for staff? Okay, back to you, Michael.
Well, as always, C versus D story. I kept up a lot of our.
Page 7.
I'm sorry, page 17. And as I said earlier, we're awaiting action by the legislature on the different funding requests that are before it. But should all those go through as recommended by the agencies and the governor's office, we'll be steady pretty good. Our state delegation has also been very helpful. I'm sorry, Sharon Nelson and so forth, and they are very much keeping track of these things there, so they're looking out for us on those requests. But I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to be able to get started this summer. Yet at the same time, realistic that the state's got some issues with its budget, and so our collective fingers are crossed. This is a carryover. The roof on this building is a carryover. It's easy to forget after leaving the old place that this is also an old building with mostly a flat roof. And so once we moved in, over time we started to see some of those issues manifest themselves in terms of leaks. So what started last year and working that problem, we soon learned that we were short in terms of budget because we were going to be in need of some architectural services to do the project right. We went back to CBG, got some additional funding, and were successful in getting that, and should do the project this year to proceed with that. The request for bids for the architectural services has been just issued, so we'll be getting going. Also this year we'll be replacing the playground at Dottie Harper Park with fully funded by CDBG funds. We'll be getting started on the downtown bike rack project, and I really want to thank Public Works for their help and partnership with this on this project, as they'll be assisting with the installation of the racks. The launch of that with our partner lobby, Walk by Burien, will be happening in May, which is National Bike Month. And so you can expect to hear more about that. On the next page, I highlight the work. There's a few fluid things going on with the school district. We're currently talking to Hazel Valley, looking at how we might expand after-school programming and doing a customized pilot project at the elementary schools. Elementary age kids is an age group that we're, relative to the other age groups, not serving as well as we could. And we want to see what we can do through the elementary schools, and we're working with Principal Jonathan Lutcher there to develop a program that will bring back to council to report more what we have in mind. But there's great interest there, working with us to see what we can do. Also, there's some other things. I think Brian Barnes has been working with the Boy Scouts about a grant. We're doing some kind of after-school coordinator position that we may have a role in at Highline High School. So that's in development. We're also talking with the athletic director, Terry McMahon, about how the kind of sports camps that the district used to do, oftentimes very disorganized way for their students, to in the future do that through a joint venture, if you will, between the school district and the Parks Department, where we would be taking the role of handling the marketing and registration for that while they contract the instructors and coaches. And so it would be a shared endeavor. We look to do a pilot project on that this summer and then expand it throughout the school year, this school year. So there's a few things in development there. Just category is kind of vague, but those are a few of the things that are active there. And as part of that, we're doing this broader needs analysis around those different age groups for both the K-6 and the special needs program.
You mentioned that elementary school kids finding the need for services there. And then, as Chief Kimmer mentioned, the congregation of young people in Town Square. I don't see a rec center or a community center. I know we have this facility, but do we have anything planned for a recreational center like a indoor basketball court or some kind of physical activity for our more mature youth?
Well, we do have a gym jam and a late night program going on now, so there is some limited programming like you described being offered now.
And is gym jam in the afternoon, or what hours is that?
It's after school on Fridays.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just one day a week. Okay.
And then we're also have our after school program that we run here in this building, but obviously we don't have a gym here. But you know, in the bigger picture, much further down the road, it's our goal to have a recreation center.
Okay, thank you.
Other discussion, Chris?
I would like to thank Michael for working so hard with Highland Communities Coalition on the idea of a joint use agreement. We have had Burien and school district have had joint use agreements going back to 1998. So we get the document signed and it goes in a drawer to the address desk and nothing ever happens with it. And this year Michael did a real yeoman's work in working with the other cities to put together an agreement. It's still in the baby stages, but it's an agreement to for the city of Burien to work with the schools and the schools to work with Burien on after-school programs using these other facilities. Those would be programs for adults and young people, as well as city to city. So there's the opportunity, the groundwork is being laid for us to work with our neighboring cities on these same types of programs. And Michael has been excellent in working on that. And it has not always been a kumbaya kind of experience. There's been time.
Other comments? I'm going to toss it back to Supervisor.
Yeah, I'll go first this time. So starting on page 15, at the top, of course, we will be continuing to work on the comprehensive plan work. So there's kind of two elements here. First is continuing to have discussions regarding last year's docket and recommendations by the Planning Commission, and that's ongoing as we speak. And that will dovetail right into the docket for this year, which we will continue updating the comprehensive plan to comply with the Growth Management Act, Vision 2040, which is Puget Sound Regional Planning Document, countywide planning policies. These are all as part of the larger update process. The docket that the Planning Commission is currently deliberating on now has a number of these items that more or less will carry over, and we will work through the comprehensive plan this year with the Commission, and of course bring that to the Council towards the end of the year. Of particular note, that will be coupled with one private rezone request, which I think that Mike mentioned as far as the current side. Following that, we'll be also working on the Shoreline Master Program, which we've been kind of coordinating with Mr. Noakes, who's kind of the point person with the Shoreline Working Group. So that is ongoing. A piece of work that we're doing now is in 2012, we were successful getting a grant from the state, a growth management competitive grant to do an urban infill study. And we are working with Heartland, who is our real estate expert. And actually just yesterday we had a get together with some developers to go through some of those findings and explore some of those approaches that we've identified. So that should be wrapping up here before June.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
Which corridors are you looking at?
Yeah, the grant identified what we call our transit priority corridors, and those have been identified as Ambon Boulevard, and what we're calling the F line, which kind of comes down through downtown and 156, and then what we're calling the Boulevard Park Corridor or the Des Moines Memorial Drive. And it kind of follows on the heels of some of the, again, kind of dovetails with some of the zoning work that we've done there as well. So basically what the study is, just as a brief synopsis, is we're looking at the development gap. So we've heard wanted to encourage redevelopment to occur. And this is the idea that the state thought was quite interesting, is study the gap. What is the gap? So basically we're defining the problem on barriers to redevelopment. And then what are the things that might move that gap to tip the scales to allow redevelopment or development to occur? So it's really kind of helping us planner people understand the development side and the financial side. So that may have benefits for the state as a whole. That's why we're successful in obtaining the grant.
Anything else for David before we move to Chip?
Okay, thank you very much. On the current planning side, bottom of page 15, an item that appears on the work program every 3 years or so is the construction code update. This year we will be adopting the 2012 construction codes and electrical codes. That should be coming before the council beginning in the second quarter of this year. And we need to get those adopted before July 1st so they can take effect. And top of page 16, streamlining development codes and eliminating outdated language. We've gotten 70% complete on that, and we've been stuck there for a little while. We'd like to, based on availability of staff this year, finish that off, and the major component on that would be revisions to the subdivision code. We're still operating under the subdivision code we adopted on an interim basis when the city was first organized. So we've been making minor modifications to it as legislature dictates, but we'd like to do a wholesale revision at some point. The next two items are new to the work program. The next one is code adjustment to reduce impediments to development, and this is an outgrowth of the meetings that we had with Dan and the business community late last year. And the focus for us is going to be on possible revisions to the sign code. We're hoping to get that started in the second quarter to be completed close to the end of the year. One thing we're also going to address, or may address, is transportation impact fee program. And we'll be looking at that in conjunction with economic development folks. The final item is a new item that we've added to the work program, and that is an expedited review process for major development projects. We're looking at trying to speed up the review and adoption process for projects of major impact to the city. Our first focus is on in-house and process improvements that we can make. Some of these arising as a result of the impediments to development workshop that we went through. We're going to be focusing on trying to go with a more intensive project review process and trim at least 25% off the review time for these projects. And we will also be using as kind of a final resort item, bringing in outside expertise if we need to allow people to focus on these projects. The first project that we're looking at is one that's already in the mill, Highline School District. The Puget Sound Skills Center is establishing a health sciences focus. Their expansion plans include a new two-story building, 25,000 square feet. It will have health sciences classrooms for 120 additional students and 8 staff members. And so we're looking at getting that one started, getting that one approved fairly shortly here. There are 2 items that are not yet into the development review process. The first one is, and the name, I'm going to probably stumble over the name, I always do, Navos Ruth Dykeman Behavioral Health Care Center for Excellence. They are going to be coming in for a type 2 review, that's a hearing examiner review, for a master plan, preparation of a master plan. We have already, as David mentioned, we have already received a quasi-judicial rezone request for this project. And so that will be going through the regular comprehensive plan review process, culminating at the end of the year. The third project that we're looking at coming in is Southwest Suburban Sewer District is proposing administrative offices and a shop at the site of the former Y building on Des Moines Memorial Drive South at Normandy Road. And that project is, it's going to involve 3 buildings, an administrative building of about 15,000 square feet, sewer operations building, and a heated maintenance and vehicle program, or vehicle storage building. We're going to be focusing on this expedited process, trying to get it up and operating so that we can get some of these projects onto the street even quicker.
There's not a lot in code to encourage green building practices. Because it's not in code, are you thinking about incentives as you're moving through this expedited permit process? Some cities use incentives cutting to the head of the line if someone is coming in with a very green proposal. So how are you incorporating that into 2013?
That's something we haven't really discussed.
I've asked, this is probably the 4th year that I've asked for this, so just think about ways of, if you aren't ready to do the code, just look for some incentives that other cities are using.
Other comments? Jack?
Yeah, as far as priorities, I'd like to see the action to the code adjustments to reduce sediments development. I'd like to see that be at the top of the priority list. I think it's important that we have movement as far as development and drainage and letting push behind other cities. And again, any competitive advantage we can find to bring new businesses and jobs to Burien. I think it's should be our primary focus.
Discussion, other questions, comments? Richard, you did it? I'm going to suggest we take a break now rather than waiting another 4 minutes. So let's take a 15-minute break. We will start at approximately 2 minutes after.
I want to let you know, the Highland Historical Society has a Facebook exhibit that we installed in the lobby.
Okay, get back to
Some of them
2013 priorities. Before I hand the floor over to Maya, I just want to see if there are any burning questions from the reports that we've heard so far. Anything, Amy, that needs to, that you want to come airtime on before we go to Maya and Public Works? Okay, so we are on page 12. And the first thing on the list is First Avenue South, phase 2. As I mentioned earlier, we have about 3 months worth of construction work left, including paving, signals, and illumination.
shut down. We don't pave in cold weather, and we don't pave in wet weather. That being said, the work remaining, paving and the very last thing on most jobs, which is striping and putting down raised pavement markers, are highly weather dependent. So right now we're looking at being complete in late May, early June. But if you have vacations planned, don't plan around that time because that's when it will rain approximately every other day. So and it makes it really hard to get your striping done when it's raining every other day because we need a nice dry period to get that done. So, but it's almost always here to get that in the project.
I have a question on that one.
Okay.
Can you give me a percent complete?
About 85, I would say. Okay. And that's really rough.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah. So there is an issue kind of flying under the radar on this one, and that is that somewhere around August, September, the prime contractor approached us and said that a disadvantaged business sub that was performing in the field wasn't performing and wasn't keeping up with their schedule, had some issues, financial issues, purchasing materials for the project. They requested permission to terminate that disadvantaged business sub and put another disadvantaged business in their place. That type of a change order on a federally funded project is actually outside of Burien's authority to approve. We have to run that through WashDOT and also the HWA. And both of those eventually provided their concurrence with the termination of that sub. But just at this point, there are issues between that sub and the prime. And I believe the sub is probably filing a light lawsuit against the prime contractor. At this point, we haven't been drawn into that other than requests for public record and subpoenas for some of our payment records between the two. So, and I think a lot of the issues right now between the two are, since the subcontractor did a partial project, it's being sure that the two parties are in agreement about how much that work was complete and what they got paid for. So, but at this point, it's in between the two of them, and we're just kind of standing alongside. But may become an issue later. Moving on to NPDES. So just here at the beginning of the year, we're drafting our report, updating our plans. We're in an interim permit right now between the old permit that was extended and the new permit, which goes into effect in August. We have copies of the new permit. Big things in the new permit will be implementing new code to bring low impact development techniques up, make them more of a requirement as opposed to a suggestion in our code. And that requirement, I think, is at least a year or two out, but we're going to start planning for that. Other big thing are increased inspections, and that's pretty significant. We're working right now to think about ways we can do that. There's some testing and inspections that we're going to probably work through a program with other cities where you can pay some money into a fund that gets taken care of. But also just our inspections of our stormwater system are going to be increased. And we've kind of bounced back and forth between using a seasonal maintenance employee to do those inspections and using the county. And so we're kind of looking at that right now to see the best, most efficient way for us to do these inspections. Moving to the next page. So NERA. So we are underway on the new master drainage plan I spoke of earlier for the storm drainage improvements. This is probably by far the most exciting project on our agenda right now. The project, the consultant I'm working with has said that this is the perfect storm of challenges and geological conditions in the field. And we are coming up with some things that are highly innovative as far as how we're going to treat water up in NERA and how we're going to meet those challenges that we get from the FAA and the proximity to the airport. So things like the types of vegetation we use, because we need to use vegetation that doesn't attract birds and things like that the airport doesn't want near the runways. And also they don't want standing water, so that we either would have to put water into vaults or find other ways to infiltrate it. And right now, we are finding some really terrific soil conditions out there that are going to allow infiltration at rates that we weren't expecting. And we're actually doing some added analysis right now, thinking we may even be able to be more innovative. But we're also able to mimic the forested condition, really mimic it around the creek as how it would exist if we weren't out there doing all this engineering. So stay tuned for that. We'll bring a presentation to you sometime in the near future that describes the types of techniques that we've been working on. Very exciting. With regard to NERA, well, let's jump down to the ramp also. So it took a little while to get our agreements for the funding, but they did get in place at the end of January for the design funding for the ramp. So that will be getting underway shortly. Keeping in mind that the design of this ramp actually is a washed-out facility, and so they actually retain design approval of their facility. So that project will be working very closely with them. Challenges on both of these projects. A big one is working with the FAA. So we have bits and pieces of NERA that are in various classified zones for the airport, particularly runway protection zones. And the FAA has very narrow thoughts about what can be done in the runway protection zone and what can't. So we've sat with them in the port a couple times, and we're working to see how much we can do in there and still stay within their guidelines and safety restrictions. So, but that's a pretty critical piece of NERA and the work we're doing right now.
Not to put too fine a point out, they're extremely conservative. They're being a real pain, and our ability to do stuff and the port's ability to do stuff there is greatly jeopardized by the way that they interpret the regulations around the airport. This particular region is one of the most conservative, and further, in our opinion, and I think Fort Burien might say the same, they appear to be somewhat arbitrary in the way that they interpret the rules and regulations about land use around the port. And so the reason why I was mentioning this here is because were it not for that, smooth sailing. But we have to go now and convince the local FAA folks, which we're working on to port, which Maya has attended meetings with these guys, to convince them that all the uses that we're proposing are in fact appropriate. We believe we're going to get there. We really do. It's just uphill, bureaucratic, what to do. So, but that's under the radar, so to speak.
So
literally, when you think about the radar.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that is actually at this point the riskiest part of this job, is getting these things approved by FAA. Probably next most riskiest is working with the port, and not that they're not working with us, it's just timeline right now, because our money has to be spent by June of 2014. And so we need to be under construction at the end of this year on some of the earlier phases of this project and going into next year. And there's a whole bunch of things that have to happen at the port as far as property rights and things like that. And so the port's working on it, but they're kind of a little bit slower. So as they drag their feet, we're going to be put under a lot of pressure once they do come around to get things through council as far as property rights and any of those issues right now. The other big thing on these two projects, or thing that we've talked about really briefly, I think I mentioned it at some point last year at council, is our interest in considering and talking to CTAC about Des Moines Memorial Drive. So Des Moines Memorial Drive, the CTAC portion, is generally fronted by Burien commercial and residential properties and the port. And then as you go north of 518, you have Burien residential commercial properties and open space and parks. So there's really very few CTAC things fronting this road. And it seems like it might be of value for us to consider having the road and being in control of how it's developed and how we interact with it on our side of the road. That being said, there's obviously cons associated with that. We would inherit the cost of maintaining that road and the cost of maintaining signals and illumination. I've actually asked my staff to kind of inventory in general what's out there to get an idea what those costs would be. And we have had just really informal discussions. I've talked with the Public Works Department over at CTAC to see what they think about it. And they seem warm to the idea, but it's certainly something we should talk about in the near future if that's going to come forward.
I'm ready.
You ready? Okay. Next on the list is the franchise with Seattle City Light. So our franchise with Seattle City Light is up in early 2014. And as it turns out, Shoreline's transfer, their franchise with Seattle City Light is also up within a month, actually I think a month before ours. And And they contacted us and said, hey, do you want to work together on this? And while we're not formally working together, we have established kind of a working group, because there are other franchises up in that include SeaTac, Tukwila, Lake Forest Park, and Shoreline and us. So there's 5 of us who have been meeting and working together, and our issues are pretty common. Probably the big ones are undergrounding and coordination and costs of undergrounding with Seattle City Light, tree and pole management. A lot of cities have complaints about kind of not having any control over when they come out and how they manage their trees and how long they leave up poles that aren't used. And so we're working through those ideas with these other cities. And also just general right-of-way use and when they come out. We've all had kind of mixed experience with about 50% of the time they get their permit before they come out. The other time we just find them out there and they're working. So we have shared issues. We have, as a group, kind of drafted some. We started drafting. Each city's kind of volunteered to draft different pieces of language for this franchise, thinking we come up with a template, and then as individual cities we modify it at the end as needed. We got a little pushback from City Light. They didn't want to meet with us all in a room, but they finally did, and they've met with us twice now. They've heard our concerns. At the last meeting, however, they did say that they wanted to draft some language for us. We've shared what we have, but they want to draft some language for us, and they are doing that a little bit slower than we had hoped. We hope to have a draft of what they were thinking by now. So hopefully in the next month or two we'll hear from them again and be able to get moving on that. They wanted us to start bringing things to them. They want to be able to approach their council in, I want to say August, September, in order to make our deadline. So they really do need to start getting this here, but we're getting there. Next item is, options, the little study that we have in the budget for the public workshop. This is becoming more of a need for us every day with the crew. We're actually very limited on our fenced parking in the back of that rental facility right now, to the point where it's almost like, we park back there like a funeral procession all lined up in rows, and we have to pull the equipment out in a certain order to get it out of there now. And I think the hardest time comes when we have seasonals during the summer. We have to park in other places. Even we've talked about trying to find off-site places for people to park and bring them in because it's getting so tight. We also don't have room back there to lay down a lot of materials, and so we're kind of sneaking stuff here and there where we can. It's pretty tight space. The idea behind this study is simply to just give us a better concept of our needs, site size, building size, and anticipated costs, and we can go chasing grants and hopefully look for some creative ways to fund a future facility. But we'll need that just kind of basic knowledge in order to move forward with looking for grants. So, and the last one on Public Works Department talks about organizational staffing changes. So late last year, we hired a new stormwater technician who's been doing great work, and we're really excited to have him on board. And then we just started our new assistant public works director, and that is Brian Roberts. He worked for about 10 years at WashDOT and 10 years at City of Federal Way as a project manager. Did some great work there. Federal Way has been very angry with me for taking him, so I think that's a great sign. And he also, his degree, interestingly enough, is in biology, but he has a license as a professional engineer, and he spent a significant amount of time running his own landscape business. He has a lot of knowledge there that's already been very helpful for us. So we're excited to have him. And then we've advertised for our new maintenance worker position in stormwater, and later this year we will advertise for a stormwater engineer.
Questions, comments? Jack?
Yeah, I have a few questions. You had talked about the public workshop. Two suggestions I'd like to make. We just heard from the planning department that Southwest Suburban Sewer District was funding the facility at the old Y. So I'd like to see us explore working with them to have a shared facility. I think it would save us some money. And if that isn't possible, right now, where's their present facility?
The Public Works Department?
No, the sewer district. Do you know offhand?
It's got their office, right?
It's on Ambon.
Yeah,
On Ambon, right? Okay, so, if a joint facility doesn't work out, which I think would be great, maybe explore their present facility if that would work for Public Works, since they probably already have the base, et cetera, already built. that might be a more efficient way for us to move forward. But my first preference would be a joint facility. I think there's opportunity for both organizations and ultimately the taxpayers to save money. The other thing I'm hoping that we can look at this year is maybe have a small pilot program, look at alternate water retention solutions. I talked to you a few months ago about this, and basically, you know, we have issues like bioswales, which we had attempted to put in, that we had some pushback from the community, but we all recognize the importance of having water retention. So I had pointed out an opportunity along 8th Avenue South to put in basically a French drain, which would retain the water briefly and also allow infiltration. And then on top of that, there'd be an opportunity for us to, right now it's not a finished sidewalk, but in that area there where I talked about right at the bottom of 136 in East South, the walkway is rather narrow. So with its proximity to Cedarhurst School, it might be an opportunity for us to have a safe area for the kids to walk instead of a ditch. You talked about the possibility of there being a timeliness issue with NERA having to come to us with legislation. My suggestion is that you have the running legislation ready in advance and already have it before us, so that we have it, and then when it's time to act, because we, as a council, have a responsibility to review actions before we do that. So that way we would have that opportunity, and if there's a time of this issue, we could act at the meeting that you make the request at. So, that's it. Thank you.
One thing I can mention is we have a huge pilot project, which is the NERA project. We'll do some, again, some really interesting techniques for both water treatment and water retention. And it's a $4.5 million project, so it's very exciting. Should have some huge benefits to the water basin also.
And following on what Jack was saying about the joint facility, Helen Silver Street has their bus stop very close to where very close to SSC. And we have this joint use agreement, and so it might be worthwhile to explore sharing some of those space with other buses. They also have a pool there. And then as far as low impact development projects, I think one of the things we need to do is help our community understand the value, the cost savings, and kind of what it does for them as a property owner and increasing their values. So I would like to see a program on Channel 21 that would have that advantages to the community of Illinois and city.
Well, even if y'all have done things like this, and their outreach is amazing. I've seen both cities twice on television, primarily on Channel 22, the King County. And I think there's probably films out there that we could run for 21. Amazing work they're doing to keep low impact development in place and prevent stormwater runoff into the streets.
And I always go back to C Street in Seattle, which to me looks like it could be part of the area.
These programs are actually much more advanced than C Street. Amazing what they're doing.
I think it would be good if our community could see C Street.
And I also think that we have some rain gardens that communities already established in Seavers. So I think that's a great meeting point for our community.
So there's more than one thing that you're suggesting could
It's
be.
just some sort of public information regarding this type of project on my town.
In successful projects elsewhere. Other comments?
And this would be targeted not only towards residential development, but also business development.
Sure.
Anything
page 9, I just want to point out, as I mentioned in 2012, we're still completing the utility tax audit, six companies to complete. Jumping over to page 10, this was also mentioned in 2012, creating the plan for financial stability. We did cut over $1 million in expenditures from the 2013-14 budget in staffing. However, we still need to resolve the structural deficit. We also changed our fund balance goal in the general fund from 10 to 20% by 2022 to also address part of that. Couple items down, analyzing replacement of the document management system. We currently have a program called Stellent, and Stellent was purchased by Oracle, and Oracle will force us to pay for an upgrade to continue receiving support. So I'd like for us to evaluate other programs. If we really want to move away from Stellent, it's better if we do it sooner so we don't continue to put more documents in it, which makes conversion to a new program much harder. So I feel a little bit of sense of urgency about that. Just below that, the budget worksheet templates have been carried over in Microsoft Excel for maybe version 1999. So they're fraught with errors when you try to open the templates. We really need to rebuild them from scratch. It's a huge, tedious project. And lastly, on page 11, we're currently working on developing our quarterly financial reports. There's an item in your Monday City Manager report regarding the first scheduled report, and that'll be on May 6th. It's going to take at least 30 days after the end of every quarter to issue these reports, so I just wanted to set some kind of time frame for you. Be happy to answer any questions.
I've been reading the proposed legislation on liquor revenues. How are you incorporating that outcome into the 2013 budget?
We haven't. It's too speculative at this point. They're kind of all over the map, and our state lobbyist is telling us there's no consensus down there. Likely that any additional revenue will continue to stay with the state or further erode the liquor tax and profits that we currently pay. So it's extremely speculative right now.
Aren't we losing?
Well, we've been losing. Well,
Yes, I know.
We had a one-time loss where the state took away funds to balance their own budget.
and then there's this notion that there's going to be this upside as more private stores make liquor available. And that we're not going to get any of that upside, and that's part of the problem. So they were going to cap us at a previous level, was, I don't know what it was, 2011 levels or whatever it was, and then the state was going to get everything above that, and we would take a one-time hit. But there's no additional revenue, that's for sure.
And isn't there increased crime by having privatized liquor? So your officers
Cops
are
are drinking on the
spending.
job.
Right, yeah, we're confiscating liquor. No, the retail shoplift rate has gone through the roof on
Yes,
that.
exactly.
So that again is something we've worked with the private sector before on organized retail theft. Very large case here, have to go on that, and we're continuing to see what we can do. The problem is we're just not getting the reports back. We don't know what the scope of the problem is, but it is significantly higher.
Well, isn't it costing private retail sales when they have to put in more security in order to document?
Well, the problem is they're not. They're not putting in more security. They had to put security in order to, when they got the liquor, to try to stop the outflow. But I think the one story that we did hear was liquor sales were supposed to start at midnight on a certain date, and our first shoplift was 11:45 on that night. So it is a huge problem. It is something that we're working with the private sector that we're going to need to address.
Any comments or questions? Jack and then Rose.
I think Rose was first.
Rose and then Jack.
Okay. I was watching TV the other day, and on the news, they were talking about Seattle, where they no longer have are coming in with their environmentally friendly block pens, and that's one of the vehicles they're using for chocolate.
Another reason not to be green.
So I just thought I would toss that out. It's a major problem apparently down in
The biggest problem is they can walk in, load up a shopping cart, and walk out. And their security is not going to confront people that do that. So either they have to be caught early so we can be there, or we try to do things with video afterwards, but it's a huge problem. I mean, we have the same problem with Tide, walking in and hampers of loading shopping carts out and just walking out with them. So there really has to be something between the private sector and us, the loss prevention people. And we're working, we did a very good case with them and just was very successful, but it's so pervasive.
So is there a need or interest in having anything added to your work plan for 2013 conversation? Comfortable with how things are?
I think eventually.
The question was, what are we, have we included that revenue around that whole issue?
I understand.
It's a AWC priority,
Right.
Association of Washington State priority.
So, and because we've come back around now to the increase of theft and shopping, and I was asking if there's anything responsive to active use of 2013 priorities. That was, just wanted to be sure.
And I will say that the work program is not encompassing a lot of what we're doing.
Okay, so
So
that's
these are
day-to-day.
these are going to be our priorities within the department. Couldn't possibly be all on the work program. So
That stems through for all of us.
Right. There are a number of things under the radar, so to speak, that we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
We think that, and by consensus on the leadership team, probably this represents maybe 15 to 20% of what we actually do. The rest of this is maintenance stuff, these things that we need to do to keep the city running.
I do have one question for you, Kim. Going back to the document management system, you said that that's a high priority to get done, but I see here the timeline, it's not scheduled to come to council until the fourth quarter. Is that truly when you want that to come to council?
Yeah, because we have a very small staff that can evaluate this, and they have a lot of day-to-day work.
Yeah, just wanted to double check. Okay. Are there any other comments or questions for us?
Are we doing all we can to buy local, like, like our office supplies and that kind of thing? Or do we?
We're working on that, yes.
If we have several good folks that could provide that to us.
Okay. Rob, and then Jack. Jack, and then Bob.
Okay. Yeah, my question concerned the quarterly reports, and I see that you're going to include contracts for 25,000. I like to see all of our contracts quarterly, so we can do that. We have a duty as council members to monitor that, and so anyway, I'd like to see that included within the quarterly reports.
I want to check in with Jerry. In our last council retreat, we had an item on B&O taxes, and I was wondering if there's any need to go.
I wanted to bring that up actually, because we got, revenue stabilization, bringing that down, so that's something that we, within one or two mentions, we kind of ignored at the council, and we need to really take it. Part of the deal in the past, biennial budget, we set money from reserves to keep it in balance, was an understanding that the council, that we would work on finding revenue sources to make it up, and we need to get into serious discussion of that, maybe it be an old tax, or if there's other taxes that we can adopt, but a way to permanently fix this structural deficit in the budget.
Any discussion around that? Or just you noted it?
Is that something we should have a study session?
Well, it's something that should be the subject of at least a couple of study sessions and discussions with council, and so far I haven't seen any real discussion of it.
I think it should be a study session subject initially, and go from there.
This is a lot of notes, yes. Okay. I'm probably sooner rather than later for our discussion, so if there's any, maybe we can.
So are we shooting for a second quarter since this is March study session? Is that?
Yeah. Okay.
Did you have a comment as well? Or did you get covered?
Maybe it's not.
On Jack's proposal to list all contracts, I agree that there should be a cutoff point. I don't know how many contracts Lori manages, but I imagine it gets into the hundreds. And for us to see these small contracts, to me, seems like it would take up all Lori's time to do that, where she should be doing contract negotiation and implementation. So I'm a strong no, and I want to leave it at contracts over 25,000.
Well, how about a compromise, 10,000? I think that's reasonable.
We've had
We have a-
25,000 for as long as I've been on council, and I think that's a reasonable number, but I'd like to hear what
That's
Kim would
the-
think would be reasonable.
That's the level at which we approve the contract. We have a duty and obligation to monitor our financial status, and I think that having at least $10,000 level will allow us to fulfill our obligation to supervise and monitor.
And again, I'll bring it back to Diane. Do we want to be on the dance floor, or do we want to be up on the balcony? For this one, I'm strongly recommending that the balcony is where policy needs to be set. I don't see any reason why you couldn't have a conversation with Kim on some of these smaller contracts, but for it to be a requirement of staff to provide that to the entire council, I think is not efficient government.
Well, we respectfully disagree with you.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question. Information-wise, what's the difference between $10,000 versus $25,000? Incremental difference in the number of contracts that we then track.
I'm not sure I could quantify it.
$45,000 is the, I can sign contracts up to $25,000. The council generally wants to see those. The other contracts are anticipated in the budgets that are adopted. And so the council in the past, at least, we do something different, but in the past, the budget authority that allows us to sign those contracts is sufficient.
Joan is right, all the contracts, it's a massive number.
Given that this meeting isn't a meeting in which decisions can be made, it sounds like this is something that you would like the council to take up at the next meeting.
We need more information in order to move forward with this.
Does that make sense as a next step? And I know Jerry did a comment about that. Okay.
I wanted to make a comment that right now we get, in our regular council meeting, we get a list of all the checks the city's written. And I think a list of all the contracts the city has would be just not as useful in terms of how much anybody looks at or what information you actually get from it. I'm not sure how much, what the difference is in the workload on city staff to produce a list like that. And I'd like to get more information on that.
I can just talk about the workloads real quick. The checklist is a computer register that we print. The contract list is manually generated.
Okay, so in terms of the action, who's on point to do what next? Somebody.
We're noting it, and we'll bring it back to council as a discussion on it.
Okay, so Mike will follow up with Kim to be sure that goes back to council.
Yeah, I've noted it.
Okay, any other comments for Kim? Okay, legal?
I'll just touch on the Craig said. I already mentioned that we extended the contract franchise till September, so I'll come back to you. We talked about Westmark on page 6, so you all know where that is. Franchise utilities, we haven't made a lot of progress on that one. Because we've been working on town square and a couple of other things. That's a massive, massive project that is likely to take, a lot of iterative work. And I don't know honestly what Craig is on that, as he's been almost exclusively occupied on town square here recently. And the last few on page 8 have to do with the next two have to do with just standardizing some procedures. So we're a 20-year-old city, and every year we're trying to beef up our structure. And some of the things that we do, we just do. I can't say we do by the seat of our pants, but because we're always well informed. But we would like to have more structure in these activities. So implementing enforcement policies for code, and some standard risk management policies are another area. The latter being particularly useful for Washington insurance consortium that we belong to. And then finally, this is kind of an oddball one, this public defender caseload standards. So the law has changed that it kind of caps the number of cases that a public defender can have. And this came up because there were a lot of uses statewide of just piling on like hundreds and hundreds of cases on an individual public defender. And it reached a point where it appeared as if the caseload was actually infringing upon a defendant's legitimate right to have a legitimate defense. And so there was also, so they imposed a cap, or I think they were thinking about imposing a cap. The effect of which would be to greatly increase our public defense costs, because we might have to hire some additional folks to handle that additional caseload. We and other cities have talked about using a weighted standard where experienced public defenders are capable of handling a much greater load than less experienced. And there's some school of thought that that should at least be taken into consideration. So I know Craig is interested in this. This is something I have talked over with our judge. We're all aware of it. And it's just something we need to do. It's kind of a play, and we're going to play for a little while there. So Craig, we're here, you might have a few other things, but those are kind of big thoughts.
On page 8, for the develop and implement standard code enforcement policies and procedures, it says obtain input from stakeholders, and all of these are staff, but I was wondering if we could get the customer in that group for input also, so business owners and citizens who are the folks who also are involved in this process.
Sure.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions, Chad?
I just want to say it again on this, and I don't want to seem unfair because Greg isn't here, but the biggest complaint I get from citizens is the request that we have a more proactive code enforcement process. So anyway, I just want to repeat that, just to make sure it gets completed.
Citizens or residents? Are you talking about residents of Burien or citizens?
Well, residents, citizens,
They're different.
No, I don't see
They're not the
different.
same. They just want to be clear, they're not the same. Legally, there's a distinction.
Excuse me?
A resident is not necessarily a citizen in terms of the formal language.
So residents.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I take issue with that comment because we have a lot of residents here that officially under the law aren't citizens.
That was fine.
Yeah, that was my point.
And I take issue with that. I view everyone who lives here as a citizen. So, I just don't think that would have a difference of opinion.
Sure. Comment.
I'll comment on Jack's comment. I hear a certain amount of frustration from people who don't think that the city's code enforcement is effective enough because they don't see action when they complain about something. But I hear more complaints from people who think that it's too proactive and is pushing them too much on things they shouldn't be. So I think the city's probably hitting a decent balance there. But I would, with respect to Lucy's comment, the stakeholder group should include some representation of people who have both been the targets of code enforcement actions and people who have been the complainants on code enforcement actions. Probably not on the same one, but at least get that perspective in there too.
Other comments, discussion, evaluations? Okay, now let's go back to city manager department. With Cindy, Jan, and Angie.
And
Yeah.
very good, yes, sir.
On page 1, at the bottom of page 1, develop the economic development strategic plan. And as you recall, in March, we brought the scope of services for that to the council for some good discussion on what you'd like to see and what's already in there. And just an update, Friday that RFP, R2 went out. So we're hoping to get some good responses, and we'll be selecting a consultant, interviewing and selecting a consultant in April, and then getting that work started in May. We're quite excited about that project. It'll be one of our bigger endeavors for 2013. On the next page, page 2, this is my portion of the NERA project in conjunction with a lot of work that Maya is doing. I'm looking at how to consolidate the properties again, and one of the things Maya did mention on what they're doing with the stormwater is how much money the innovative solutions that they're doing are saving in terms of how far they can stretch those grant dollars. A lot of times innovation is costly and experimental, and in this case, a lot of the solutions that the consultant that we're using is coming up with are actually more cost effective than the traditional solutions. And the upside of that is that the stormwater that we're developing with the grant money cover a lot more acres of developable property, meaning that those can be brought into service and development cycle a lot quicker. So that's quite a good thing from my perspective. And to that extent, one of the things that we'll also be doing this year and probably into the next year is starting that quiet market feasibility in terms of talking to real players, in terms of developers, owners, users, end users of the property, that letting them know that this is coming online, what the cycles are, and really starting to get some quiet interest in building that out, and in conjunction with the timelines on the infrastructure. The next one is the Burien Town Square. As was alluded to, this is highly dependent on the transfer of the property, and we are hopeful that will be a good outcome. It's one of those that we have to stay tuned to, but I think there's some good plans for finishing out Town Square. It is definitely one of those projects where all eyes are on it. It's at the center of the community. It's a game changer for the community, and definitely something that we want to keep pushing to get completed and really set a positive tone for development in the community. The next one is talking about reusing or redeveloping vacant parcels or underutilized parcels. An example of this might be the old fire station, which is still being used actually due to some construction delays at the new fire station. But
Scott has some information on that.
What a great place.
Were we approached by the Gentlemen's Club?
Oh, yeah, the Gentlemen's Club for the old fire station.
No, council would be good for that.
I also want to, on that property, I know that there's a group of nonprofits that are exploring possibly using that to put a multi-use center in the transform area and food bank. And they're working with other nonprofits, so, and they're exploring using that site. So we have an alternative,
Nonprofit Gentlemen's Club. Okay.
Let's move on, Ben.
Move along. So as the economy picks up and as more interest comes to Burien users. You know, taking a look at some of those properties that either are publicly held or by the city or by other agencies, or even those in the private sector where they're looking for some assistance and maybe taking a property that they've been sitting on for some time that they think is now ripe for redevelopment, then figuring out what we can do to leverage interest in that property and talk to them about what our plans are for that area, similar to what Dave was talking about with nodes and all the work that they're doing on the development side, and saying, this is what we see an appropriate use for your parcel might be, and how can we help you get there. So that's another thing in the work product. The transit-oriented development phase 2, this is one of those that has been out there for quite some time. We have been anticipating a residential development coming in. I think the last one that they had targeted was a senior housing development with some mixed use on the ground floor next to the transit center. And the latest thing that we're hearing on that is that they are possibly going to need to go out to a RFP again to re-advertise, and this is mainly due to the time frame that it's taken to make progress on that. And they, according to the county rules, they'll have to re-advertise and get that going again. They haven't indicated that would change the project scope. We're going to clarify that with them more. So for right now, we're still assuming that is a senior affordable housing with ground floor retail that would be on that parcel just south of the transit center. And it is a phase 2 of that development. So all the work that was done was in anticipation of phase 1 being the garage and phase 2 being that other parcel. There are some additional work product on our end that would be the result of that in terms of concept plans and then design guidelines that were previously approved that would have to go through a new cycle now. So that does impact us. So we're coordinating with the county on that. As Chip mentioned before, we are looking at an outcome of our impediments to development work. We are looking at a possible change to our transportation impact fee program. There were a lot of good ideas that came out of that group in terms of different ways that could encourage redevelopment but still keep the program in place and still have it be fair and equitable as we're required to have from a regulatory standpoint. So we'll be, as time permits, we'll be taking a look at that and bringing it back at some point for maybe a program revision on that. Finally, the support Burien Wellness Cluster. So I've been working on that group for some time now and trying to give them some support and guidance and maybe being a little more formal. We did start a membership program last year, and we started getting people to turn in their membership forms, getting them to be more formal. This year we're going to be looking at adopting some really simple bylaws and governance structures for them to then also start developing a leadership structure. One thing to note on the wellness cluster is that we had a kind of a unique situation with different levels of users with wellness. As you know, it includes everything from chiropractors to Highline Medical Center, and we have kind of 4 big users in medical in the wellness cluster, and they all had something going on that really was distracting last year. Highline was doing a merger with Franciscan, which they're still working on. Shadow's going through a merger. Navos was on the absorbing side of taking over a lot of smaller nonprofits, which is, as you hear about in other places, they're creating some opportunities for Burien actually. And then Group Health was going through some of their restructuring because of all of the issues that they were seeing coming with the changes in Medicare and Medicaid with the Affordable Care Act. And then I think that's before. So I think now that they've gone through that, we're starting to hear that they're starting to be able to look out again rather than go through these internal changes, which are pretty significant changes for all 4 of them. that's a good thing. But, so I think the wellness cluster will start ramping up again, and we'll give them some more structure and hopefully see some more leadership from that group. And I think that is the end of my.
And then question for economic development, 2 questions. I see the section on page 2 about encouraging reuse or redevelopment of vacant or underutilized properties. When will the city be looking at retaining and bringing in new businesses? Recruiting and retaining our current businesses so that we have fuller storefronts in our streets.
Sure. I don't know if everybody recalls from our discussion last month or this month on the economic development strategic plan, but that was definitely one of the larger items in the scope of services was developing a business retention recruitment program. And based on some of the feedback from council members, we also specified under that a more detailed small business program under that. So that would be definitely part of the strategic plan, action plan.
So we might see this work program for 2013 modified or added to the 2014 program for that?
Depending on the implementation schedule and that action plan when we prepare the work, there could be things that, as Councilman Edward said, there could be some low-hanging fruit, quick win type things that we might be able to do right away. Whether that results in an action or a work plan, it might be. And just to note on that also, what we're looking for is a more robust program. There are things that we do on an ad hoc, everyday basis that we deal with businesses coming and going that we respond to, working with the Small Business Development Center on clients that they're working with in the community. So there are things that we're doing. We're just trying to see if we can do it in a more robust fashion, more planned fashion.
Thank you. And then the second question is, we talked a little bit about the transit parking garage. Do you know at what capacity that garage is being used right now?
I don't know that. I'm just dealing with the phase 2 portion of it.
Okay. So when will the city be re-looking at the parking for the whole downtown area? I think parking.
In terms of capacity?
Yeah, in terms of capacity and planning for the future, because from what I've heard from businesses and shoppers, that parking continues to be a challenge. And we have a municipal parking lot that I drive by often, and it's empty. So when are we going to figure out how to use what we have and then how to plan? Instead of borrowing parking spaces for different businesses, I think we're going to hit the wall.
Yeah, on that, we actually remember when we did the parking studies for the downtown, we did a whole study on that, and what we kind of agreed, or what was written up in there was to first build out the town square and then see how that was performing and then check that in. But that's kind of what was discussed
So do
previously.
we have a target date for that?
Well, I think the first thing is to complete the construction first and kind of check in.
And just personally, I think that if we wait for town square to finish, I think we're going to be missing a responsibility for addressing the parking.
That's just what was discussed back
So
then.
I think if we can reevaluate that because of the economic downturn, what's happening in town square, I think we might want to look at parking sooner than later.
Okay, Bob, did you have a comment?
Yes, I want to go back to the clarification on the wellness cluster. You mentioned, Dan, that they're going to formalize the membership. What's the benefit?
Well, my understanding is that several years ago, when they were looking at different employers in Burien, they noticed that we had a high degree of wellness providers and medical providers in the community, and it would be a good idea to get those folks together and have some formal sharing of what they're all working on, as well as an opportunity for them to informally communicate with each other based on their needs. Those groups, the wellness cluster also includes our educational providers here in terms of the Puget Sound Skills Center and Highland Community College. And So a lot of the training and workforce development that they provide, and hearing directly from medical providers in the couple of years, or the few years that it's already been in operation, has changed some of the curriculum that those institutions are looking at. And it also provides an opportunity for some of those students to then directly connect with some of those employers, and that's already benefited some of the employers who have taken students through internships and then actually hired them. So they're getting a more professional staff and not having to sometimes search as hard for trained staff. The goal of it is really to reinforce the city's interest and support for the wellness as one of our major employers, but also to generate a lot of cross-cultural communication between the different employers. And that's one of the benefits of the theory of clusters in general in economic development, as you get these groups together, and the more they communicate and the more they share employees, the stronger the bonds are in the community and the more successful those employers are.
I would like to add to that one of the biggest benefits of a cluster we've seen so far is bringing the schools in, and specifically the one at Burien is called Health Sciences. And they have worked with PSSC to further develop the program on the Evergreen campus. And PSSC has worked with Highline Community College. So they're all working together on a pathway to education careers. This led directly to PSSC wanting to build the building for medical education on their campus. So it seems kind of quiet sometimes, but they've done some really good stuff.
Other comments or questions for Chip for Dave before we go to Chip?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, go to Dan.
We work a lot together.
Dan.
So,
I am sorry. Unless
Really?
Jeff or David wanted to.
I apologize.
Okay, yes. So my human resources section starts on page 3. And that first item there is really what is probably been taking up the majority of our time during this first quarter in 2013. We did meet a few times, well, quite a few times since August of 2012 with the union to negotiate an initial contract. And that typically does take longer because it is an initial contract. We're making good progress now. We've been meeting 3 to 4 times a month.
Angie, I don't know the acronym. Could you explain what it is?
Yes, it's the International Union of Operating Engineers, and it represents our maintenance, public works maintenance
Thank
workers
you.
only, which is 9 people, 9 positions. So we're getting close, and they're going well, but it just takes time. So we're working our way through that, and Maya and Jan are also serving on that. Overseeing the Good to Great program, this is one that will probably continue to be on my work plan forever, but with different phases going on. For 2013, we have identified communication and excellence, pursuit of excellence as our primary training topics, and we have training lined up for just leadership team, because as the leaders go, so the rest of the organization follows as well. So we felt that was really important to have that emphasis. And then we've also planned, or I'm in the process of planning, some employee training as well, so that we're making sure that it reaches all parts of the organization. One thing that we're kind of excited about, and this actually started in a minor way last year, is we designed a introduction to our Good to Great program that we ran with our summer day camp staff. So we're reaching out now to our temporary staff as well, and intermittent staff members with that. So we did that last summer. This year we're working on developing a more robust 2 to 4 hour training for our seasonal employees, primarily
programs there. But it'll also allow us to incorporate new employees into that training so they have some exposure to what good to great is. Because we do say that a lot, or try to say that phrase a lot. The next two items actually flow out of the Good to Great program. One of them is the Employee Recognition Program. It's always a good idea to look at programs every few years and just make sure see if there's a need to refresh them at all. And so we actually planned to do this last year, and Scott Greenberg was taking the lead on this. And then, as you know, Scott went to Mercer Island, and so we postponed this until 2013. And this will probably, we do have a new volunteer, Kim, to lead the program. So I don't know what to expect to come out of this one, but it's a good opportunity to meet with the employees and find out what their needs, desires are for the program. In a similar vein, the performance review process is kind of the same thing. That also flows out of our Good to Great program. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a committee, employee and leadership team, joint committee, that developed a performance review process. And we just think it's time to look at the form again, make sure it's still an effective tool for everyone. I have to say that about 5 years ago, we went to having all annual reviews due in January for the main staff, and then for leadership team, they're due in April. So that's why we're beginning this process during the second quarter after we have that April performance review completed cycle. And it's been I get evaluations on everyone now. So it's been a great system by having them all do it set times throughout the year. It's a lot of work for the department directors and supervisors during that one period, but they know it's coming, so that helps. The next issue, and this will be a major one, is conducting the 2013 salary survey. And as you know, every 3 years, per your council's financial policies, that we do a review of the salaries and also the benefits for all employees. And this is one issue I did put on under the radar screen, because as you're probably aware, Burien is one of the few cities that has not experienced layoffs. But we have done that by not giving COLAs or reducing the medical benefits primarily, while some of our comparable cities have continued to grow. Now, at the same time, we've had the recession going on, so that adds some stability to our workforce. Or you have, when I'm recruiting, I have a really good pool of laid off people that are looking for jobs. So it hasn't been a problem right now, but I just wanted to put you guys on alert that with the budget adjustment process and starting in the fall, I believe, there might be some issues that are brought up. As we come out of the recession, it's getting harder and harder. It will become harder and harder to recruit. And I will say that the majority of our positions are underpaid. Most dramatically, it is in the department director realm. So right now I'm recruiting for the community development director position, just opened yesterday. We'll see what kind of pool we get. But the recession has helped us fill positions, but we can't rely on that forever. So I guess that's the message. Another thing that I'm looking at that could influence this is we have 5 generations in the workplace right now. And we are very much over the age 55 group. And about 2 years ago, we did a study where we asked the question, how many of you are looking at retirement within the next 5 years? 10% of our staff said they would. So now, we've seen a few of them already, but I am anticipating some vacancies just because of life changes in people, so that's something to look at as well. The other item that I wanted to put on your radar screen that's not on the work plan is there could be some, well, healthcare reform is bringing several changes, and one of the most significant years of change is 2014. So Kim and I are both studying the issues and trying to figure out how it affects the city of Burien. One of the key issues that could have budget impacts is the healthcare being a requirement for employees who work more than 30 hours. Right now, we don't provide benefits for our summertime, our temporary employees, so people who have an end date. And that would be our summer camp, day camp staff who primarily are high school and college kids still living at home. And then it also affects our public works temporary maintenance assistants. Now typically, those would be college kids, but because of the recession and the layoffs, we're getting adults who are, trying to support families. So it's a real unique time for all this to come in, but that's one of the primary issues that we're looking at. So Kim and I are aware of that. We'll keep you informed if we have questions or need some direction from you guys.
Questions, comments for Angie?
First of all, I want to point out a very astute political move. Mike is going to be asking for a budget increase, so we've all been drinking coffee all morning. He's locked the doors to the bathroom. I also want to discuss the employee recognition program. And one thing I'd like to see us work into this is a way to recognize employees that are recognized by the public for going above and beyond, outstanding employees, and find a way to recognize them publicly, maybe on Channel 21 or within the newsletter. We have a lot of great employees, and I think it's important that when they get a high level of praise to put that, make sure they're recognized.
Other comments or questions? Jan?
So the management administration starts with the inside and on the page. So here we have engaged the community and city government, and I'm going to talk about the engagement part and also the improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the city communication tool at the same time, because they are related to each other. So thank you to the Deputy Mayor for asking a question around outreach. So this year we not only going to do outreach, but we're going to do engagement, and this is a sustaining process. We recognize that this have to be along the along the work going to be reviewed. So it's going to be on this year work plan. We've got probably going to be in the future years work plan as well. How it is that we can engage the community racially, economically, socially, geographically into what we do here at the city government. And it's one of the questions that a lot of community kind of struggling with. I have talked with community development consultant people that I used to work with, and one of the first things that we should do is to kind of find out as a city what do we want to use as a metric to measure success. Could it be more diversity, in terms of application to the advisory board, to the council? Could it be higher voter turnout? Just those kind of things that we can kind of formulate strategy to work plan to address those kind of things. It's kind of the advice that I got, also a lot of feedback I got is that so we want to engage the diverse community in what we do. So the first question we should ask is what is it for them, what kind of incentive is it for people to basically participate in what we do. The thing is we kind of want to let them know what we're doing, and programs such as the the prescription card discount, program, and also event put together by the park department, that kind of thing. So we want to get the community to know what we do those things. So talking about that, that has to do with the communication office. We think about what kind of strategy that we want to do. One strategy has to do with the television channel that we have here. Last year we have a plan to talk to Evergreen High School, for example, to get the senior in the journalism class to do segments that we can feature on our TV. But the standard of those kind of products is kind of still not up to par to put on TV yet. So we continue to work with the class there to get it on TV. So we were thinking, hey, if the kid can tell their parent that they have film on TV, then they get more people to watch it. So we kind of want to do that. But so this year we were thinking of also talking about the generational gap, how it is that, and we talk to the people in the community who do this kind of community outreach. A lot of time, people don't read the city newsletter that we send out, and it costs us a whole bunch of money kind of to put it together, to print them, and to get them out to folks. So we're gonna start phasing out the newsletter beginning in the third quarter of this year, and the money that we save that we can use to a lot of other things that kind of promote what we're doing here, such as the banner project. We're thinking about putting banner in different locations in the city, such as at 148 First by the Dome, the Pagoda Dome, or at the overpass bridge up in North Burien by 128 First. So kind of get more people in the area that we recently annexed to, what we're doing. Also, all the ideas such as the film segment, how to make our television more attractive. We have Surgeon McLaughlin, recently did a film segment for us. We also just filmed one of the nonprofit in the city, CARE, so that's going to be up on our TV as well. So we continue to do that kind of thing just to get people more, to make it more attractive. One other thing that we're thinking about doing is, we're talking to a outreach person, a person who do a lot of outreach in the Latino community, for example, working for ECOS, and he was saying they read, La Raza newsletter, for example, the newspaper, but they don't, even though we have a Spanish session in our newsletter, the Latino community don't really read it. So we're thinking, hey, with the savings that we have, maybe we can use just a Spanish version of the city newsletter. So ideas like that, we continue to work on it, to fine tune it, just to get people to know what we're currently doing, the program we offer, and hopefully that gonna get more people to want to participate in what we're doing.
Good Space guy's gonna be pretty disappointed. He doesn't enjoy that Spanish newsletter.
You have two more, right?
Yes, I do. I'm going to wrap it up really quick. The next item is manage the competitive bidding process for solid waste, recyclable, yard waste collection services on page 1. Maya and I are working on that. We are at the bullet number 3, which we have selected Jeff Brown of Epicenter to be our consultant. For those of you who don't know Jeff Brown, he, for over 15 years, he pretty much the guy to go to for all the city, in most of the city in King County, in their contract negotiation and procurement project for this kind of work. Currently working with the city CTAC, Belleville, and just recently he worked with the city of Des Moines, Aquila, and just a whole host of different cities. So we are working with him on a draft RFP and a contract to be sent out, probably going to be in early May, and going to be on the street for about a couple of months, and then we start the evaluation process and whatnot, and then present it to council in the fourth quarter here. And then the last one is developing council policy and procedure for council election by ward or district. So I guess I don't have to report on that. Council agrees we know about this.
Comments to questions?
So, I'd like to see us revisit the Kids and Cops initiative, and just on a more general level. So when I know we're reaching out to the school district, and so I guess I'd just like to get a sense of, if there are steps that we can take in conjunction with the school district to help our schools. And so, I don't, Mike's heavily involved in that, so I guess I just hope that at some point this year we'll have an idea of how we can move forward with the school district and kind of address some of the issues we wanted to.
Jan was very much involved in that as well. You know what, council was very split on that issue. And so I would need a real direction from you folks. Some of you are pretty critical of pursuing it all. So I would need some pretty specific direction from the majority of the council on that.
Sure, and I guess at this point I'm not asking for us to put forward something, but I know that we are in communication with the school district, and I hope that at some point there could be, either from the school district or in conjunction with staff, some thoughts about steps we could take, and then of course council would consider those and how we want to address that.
Jack and Rose.
Yeah, on that subject, I think personally that the kids and cops, especially on the kids part, I think it went too far. I think that our emphasis should be on, and where it is appropriate, is early childhood education. I think that's where we can have the most impact. And so anyway, I'd like to bring the focus back to specifically that early childhood education. I think the police portion of it should be separate. What was proposed was a 2-year police search, which was money to care for. And then move to the education portion of that. And I think that they're both serious issues. They both need to be dealt separately. So anyway, I'd just like to share that duty.
And I'm going to support resuming the discussion around kids and cops or something to that effect. I was watching a news program a couple of weeks ago, and a former police chief from New York City, and this was several long years ago that he was there, but he is the one that implemented what they called cops and kids. That was very effective in working with the schools and in bringing the crime in New York City. So I'm not suggesting we have a horrible crime rate here. I'm just pointing out that we are not the first ones involved in this. New York City has already been there and done it.
Our mistake was not flipping around kids and cops,
Yeah.
we just done cops and kids.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's a very important issue. I don't think council ever had the in-depth discussion of that we should have. We heard from people from the community that didn't really know where we were trying to go. I don't know that we ourselves knew exactly where we were trying to go. And so rather than be pushed around by people that do not understand something before we understand it ourselves, I think we ought to bring it back and discuss it.
Is there a suggestion there around another study session to try to see if there's some common pieces of what was kids and cops that could go?
Sure. Well, I think that, I mean, I agree with Jack that early education should be consideration, and that's frankly what the school district thinks we could most help with, and I think that is the direction we should consider going. I'd like to just keep it open at this point and kind of have that conversation and then hopefully come up with some steps that we could agree with the district that would be useful. With regard to the police part, I would also like to see us reconsider. I know that we were considering adding resources, and we thought that would be important, so I'd like us to evaluate whether that is still something that we would like, that would be helpful for our community to consider adding resources, then what the options would be for doing that, if that is, like, and whether it is separate or together. To me, I mean, whatever's easiest.
And just so I met 2 times separately last week with Susan Infield and talked about a couple of things that or mutual interest, and I think council may or may not be aware that in the strategic planning group, the core strategic planning group for the teacher, or for the school district. So I'm having a lot of interaction with schools, and I think Susan really understands that Burien is interested in a very tangible way of kind of breaking out of the silos, there's a school district and there's the cities. And so Michael mentioned this in his report that we are working on kids and cops and light. It might be thought it's not a kid, this is a cops component, but we're talking with the schools directly about a tangible program that will cost money to the city that we can help them with things that we do well. So for example, we do programming really, really well. So an after-school program is beneficial to a school because it extends the school day, gives them an opportunity for homework and mentoring, and we might be able to do soccer, or whatever it happens to be. So there are very serious discussions going on about how that might work. And as we get a little bit further along, and Michael met with Susan last week as well. So we're actively working on a relationship with the school system and trying to do something that would be acceptable to the council. And we're still in the very early but serious discussions on that.
Okay, Lucy, Jeff, thank you. Both topics are critical for the sustainability of our community. I will only consider looking at both topics if they're separate. I think that if we're going to ask voters to support these issues financially, just from the pulse that I have from community members, it needs to be separate. So, and to succeed, separate.
Without getting into detail, about the issue, I support Lucy too. I think that these issues have to be brought up, but I think they shouldn't be linked. I think they should be brought up separately. They both have their own merits and they both have their own complexities. So rather than link the two, I'd like to have them as study sessions topics, but separate topics.
Okay, so one study session proposal here is around kids.
Rather than deciding here today whether it's going to be kids and cops together or whether it's going to be separate, why don't we just have a study session talking about possibilities? Because right now we're starting to limit what that discussion will be. Let's not limit it. Let's have the conversation and then start narrowing down what we want to do.
Okay, so the big umbrella has to do with kids, early childhood development, relationship with the school district, and some level of public safety. Okay, are those the key issues then? That would be included. Okay, any other conversation, discussion before we sort of go on this 2013 plan and curriculum launch?
I have one other thing I would like to bring up. And I made a note on the wrong place. But we often have things that we have talked about, like the community center. We wanted to have a community center, and we made a decision to use this building instead. I don't think the community totally remembers that. We have a situation with Westmark where they have stepped back into the picture again. What does that mean for us? I think that we ought to have some way, I don't know if it's a study session or a place on our agenda where we revisit those issues. We don't have to go into detail on anything, but just to kind of inform our community, like why we don't have a community center right now. There was a long discussion about that on the blog not too long ago. And the feeling I got from the blog on that issue was that we say we're going to do something and then we don't do anything.
Community center or rec center?
Well, we were calling it a community center in those days, but some kind of center.
Okay, I mean, this is a community center that we're sitting in, right?
The piece is missing is the recreation.
Okay, I just want to be clear.
Right.
But and there are probably more things than these two that we have talked about, we've made a decision on, put it on hold, we can go move forward with it later, and the community kind of loses there. And somehow, we just need to communicate better with our folks.
I'm gonna just ask for a clarification, which is, are you asking for a list of those kinds of issues to come back for
I'm
discussion?
asking for a mechanism in which we can address those issues with our community. Whether it's
I'm just trying to get clear, that there needs to be some way of tracking what those issues are in addition to the community/reps. That's an example.
I think the council can be that sounding board of what issues we hear from our constituents or from residents that are question marks still. Is that, do you agree?
No, we have an opportunity to address that with, when we set our future council agenda.
I know, I just wanted to throw it out here today as something to think about.
Anything else? Okay, what I'm gonna suggest then is that we break for lunch, which has been very kindly set up outside the door. And I just wanna remind, staff before you leave, I think we have an evaluation form that we could complete.
Has that been passed out?
No, I have it in my
Okay,
phone.
could so before you leave, this is important, Diane, so with all the staff, I'm sure. But thank you guys for coming this morning. We appreciate it.
One thing real quick, I'm sure we have more food than we're gonna be able to eat. We have several members of the public here that have taken the time, the interest in your city government. So I'd like to ask if we can invite them to partake in the lunch if they so